a stark sense of honesty with their work uncovering the nuances of grief, abuse, and trauma, while still showcasing the inevitability of joy and healing. And you have a book called Lavender and Cigarettes.
Yes.
And where can you get it?
Bottle cap class.
Ooh, I love bottles.
There's a link. Yay, cigarettes. There's a link.
No, yay, friends, cheering friends on, that's all, sorry.
There's a link in the participating artist page on Spring Rights Network. There's a link to these artists. Thank you. I just learned how to do
Hi, I'm Aiden. This is an essay that I published in Salty World last fall. It's called The Abuse I Endured Was Real, and I have the seizures to prove it. One minute I was 19 and horny, scrolling mindlessly on Tinder. In the blink of an eye, I was 22 and swinging my legs in a neurologist's waiting room. Being told the seizures I were having were a trauma response and I had PTSD from being in an abusive relationship was not much of a shock. It made sense. The seizures had started mere weeks after I initially broke up with my abuser and worsened in frequency as we dipped in and out of our relationship, getting back together and breaking up several times over the next 2 months. The specifics of my seizures didn't align with that of epilepsy. When I was told they were a trauma response, it just made sense. It was strange to be given a label, to be told that the abuse I had endured was real and had caused neurological damage. It was validating, especially after my abuser and many of their friends had gaslit me into thinking it wasn't abuse, called me crazy, a liar, dramatic. But validation only goes so far. To be told my PTSD was real and there was real repercussions for the verbal and emotional damage I had gone through was overwhelming. My seizures were no longer some nebulous concept of being unwell. Now they had a cause. But to start getting better, there was a mountain of trauma I had to work through. To name it meant I had to look at it. I had met my abuser on Tinder, first starting our relationship as a casual hookup situation before becoming an official couple. It took me a long time to realize what was happening was abuse. The constant anxiety I felt around him wasn't normal. It wasn't normal to be yelled at or forced into sex or to be told I was hard to love. There was a lot that wasn't normal about that relationship, but I was 19 and they were 22 and I didn't know any better. I wanted to be loved, even if that so-called love was painful. So I brushed every fear aside and I stayed. We dated for a year before that initial breakup. The on-again, off-again part of our relationship lasted many confusing, upsetting months after that. In those months, my seizures were unmanageable. It lasted hours, cycles of convulsions overtaking my body whenever I started to feel stressed or anxious, which was often, making my seizure a nearly daily occurrence. It's been almost 2 years since I started having seizures, and months since I last saw or spoke to my abuser. Their absence from my life has made the seizures notably less frequent and more manageable. I do still have them, occasionally overtaken by a sinking feeling as I remember them screaming at me in the street, or jumping in front of a car during an argument, or on top of me while I whispering no with an mantra. It enrages me that they got to move to a new city and get a new partner and start a new job, while I'm stuck here until graduation, surrounded by places that are heavy with memories. As I walk to get coffee, I can't help but notice. That is where I got burned by their cigarette. That is where they said they would die without me. That is where I sat and cried every day in those 2 weeks when I lived with them. They can forget what they did to me, but I can't. My body is holding on to those endless months of anxiety and isolation, spitting out my trauma and turning it into convulsions. It makes sense that my seizures are from PTSD. When I was getting the EEG done, my technician explained the impact of trauma on the brain. I don't remember exactly what he said as he pointed to different parts of my head to show me where and how my brain was impacted, but I can remember the relief I felt knowing that what I went through was real, the proof held in the scans of my brain. While there is some peace about knowing that my story is true, there is also something terrifying about having to confront this truth. Since being told my seizures are a trauma response to an abusive relationship, that I have PTSD from everything that happened to me, I felt disconnected from my body. My seizures has always made me feel separate from my body. There's an inherent dissonance when you are convulsing on the floor, unable to get your limbs to stay still. But I'm holding on to my truth. I am trying to reclaim my body. My abuser's actions rewired my brain. That's intimate, the same way a chokehold is. But they are far off in some new city with a new life, and I'm learning to nurse the wounds they left. Therapy and medication and finding ways to be in myself, to be in my body. I know I will never be 19 and laying on a dorm bed swiping on Tinder again. Trauma has all but killed that version of myself, turning naivety to anxiety, turning recklessness into care. I will never be who I was before abuse, but I will also never be my abuser's chokehold again either. As much as my body is keeping score, remembering every bad thing I endured in that relationship, I'm working to make sure there are good things now to remember too. And maybe one day I will have my last teacher.
Our next author is Sorayya Khan. Sorayya is the author of We Take Our Cities With Us, a memoir, recent, 2022, and 3 novels. Is it pronounced Nora? By a Queen's Road and City of Spies, which won the Best International Fiction Book Award at the Sorayya International Book Fair. You can follow her on Instagram at sorayya.khan or sorayyakhan.com. And again, those links are in the participating artist page.
Thank you so much, Robin, and the Community Arts Partnership for doing Spring Nights every year. So many events, we're so appreciative. And thank you to all of you for being here today. I'm going to read from 2 short excerpts from my memoir, and the first one is just the first scene, opening pages. It's called We Take Our Cities With Us. My mother was white and my father was brown. My mother Dutch, my father Pakistani. If she'd had a choice, she would have been brown. She tried, sitting near swimming pools during short summers when we lived in Vienna, and long ones when we lived in Islamabad. But her attempts came to a full stop with basal cell carcinoma when sunscreen replaced sun as her best friend. My father's brown was constant, except that when he grew older and gray, in a certain light and on a certain part of him, his color lightened. I am in between. I pretend I didn't know that I was brown until we moved from Austria to Pakistan, and I saw it all around, and I made it mine. But my truth of color and country is complicated. Color is a fact for my American-born children. We didn't wake up one morning and decide our children were ready for the news. You're brown. Almost as soon as they could talk, they put their little arms next to mine and decided they were darker. They were always right, because when summer came and my color deepened, so did theirs, and our skin tone never matched. Next to their fathers, their arms and legs were not a match, but close enough. That's okay, our son said about my outsider status and patted my arm, because they must have thought I needed comforting. Before long, they'd ask, "Where are we from?" I'd say, "You are from where we are from, Pakistan, and from where you were born, here." Naeem, my husband, would remember my mother and add, "Also from Holland, where Nani is from," which would surprise me because I'd forgotten. There is no flag for their combination, and anyway, the white in that equation, the 1/4 of them that is my mother, was ignored even then. Nani is the brownest person we know, I heard them say once, as if they'd always known that color was a state of mind, not pigment. My mother's allegiance to brown was resolute. She was forever on the side of the underdog, as if she'd lived it, coming of age in Amsterdam during World War II, as the daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of white Catholics. She'd half joke, "I am absolutely positive I have Arab blood in me," and then react to our skepticism with, "Now don't you forget about the Arabs in Spain or the war between the Dutch and the Spanish." She threw around history the way all of us had been thrown around the world. I knew then that history lived alongside us. But until she was gone, I didn't understand that her history lived there as well. She was right. You cannot leave history behind. But when you are the daughter of my mother, Terra, you cannot leave her behind either. So this next excerpt is about halfway through the book, and this is from a chapter that I think of as my Syracuse chapter. And we're just about to leave Syracuse. Eventually, we would leave Solvay, just as we left Islamabad. A few days before moving, and all at once, dog day cicadas emerged from their slumber in the wooded hill across the street. Their mating song was a buzzsaw gone wrong, an ear-splitting version of crickets at a specious pitch and time of day. I closed the windows, but they failed to keep out the racket, and transformed our apartment into a baking oven so that rivulets of perspiration dripped down my back. I was transported to my first summer in Islamabad, when my parents satisfied my childhood pleas and erected a tent in our bare back lawn, complete with a tiny irrigation ditch to catch the monsoon rain that turned the ground into mud. The canvas tent swarmed with mosquitoes, despite being sprayed with DDT, and was never raised again. Leaning over to pick up more books and add them to a tomato box salvaged for our move from a grocery store, I remembered the smell of earthworms and cockroaches in that summer's mud. Our baby cried and cried and cried, and I wanted my mother. Shahid never slept, not at night and not during the day, and not after his pediatrician berated me for the expectation. Exhausted, I put him in his crib while I packed. Several boxes later, my resolve broke. I sprinted a few steps to our wall of windows and threw open every single one, standing in the path of the cicada noise on which, I swear, a gentle breeze rode in. The cacophony of Shahid's cries and the cicadas' drone almost felled me. I opened the bedroom door where our round baby, wearing only a diaper in his crib, had pulled himself up and stopped crying. I reached for him, his soft brown skin red with heat and slippery with sweat and tears, his baby heart pounding hard against me as I buried kisses into his triple chin. When his father came home, the apartment smelled of dust and life, and he and Kamal lay on the floor and blew raspberries on Shahid's belly, their smiles one. A bus strained up the street, past the red house and library, and it drowned out the cicadas before it got to the church. The boys, deaf to all the noise but theirs, laughed in unison. We take our cities with us, I thought, and I wondered what our children's would be. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kris Haines-Sharp. Kris lives with her wife and pup in Ithaca. She was a 2020-21 Craig Garden Writer in Residence, where she was selected to study with Kate Moses in the Book Garden Writing Program. Her work has appeared in Entropy Magazine, Adelaide Literary Magazine, Academy of the Heart and Mind, and the one I can't pronounce, I'm sorry, Roy Fain Art Press. And you can find her website on the participating artist page. It's KrisHaines-Sharp.com. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for coming. If by some rare opportunity you get to my website, most of it's now about my campaign for Common Council, so the writing website is kind of tucked in over at the far right, and that was in the campaign. I just want to say. Okay, so this is from my memoir in progress, and it's a piece about, well, you'll find out what it's about. And it's called Where to Rest. It's a dry August, oven hot. I get a group text, my sister is included, from my father. Can you meet us at Green Springs Friday p.m. at 7? My parents have decided they want a natural burial at Green Springs near their home in Ithaca. It's a beautiful spot. Kim and I get there first and wait for our parents to arrive. Their blue Subaru pulls up in the drive, Dad with his seat leaning back, arms straight, wrist on top of the wheel. He looks a little bit like a teenager trying to make the family car cool. Mom gets out of the car. This is the place, she says in lieu of hello. Last time we were here, a dog was digging in the dirt. A dog digging up a body, probably. I can't get that out of my mind. It was so horrible. By the time we've ended our brief scouting of the site, Mom is calm, but I'm not at all convinced we'll be back for part 2 of the process. 2 days later, my sister and I get another text. Same request, only we are to meet with Michelle, the caretaker. This time, our 3 cars pull up together. Michelle is waiting for us, bucket in one hand filled with tools and stakes, and a clipboard in the other. I instantly love her. She's beautiful, a large smile under her mask. Her eyes squeeze almost shut when she laughs. We are all masked, which seems a bit silly out in the woods scoping out burial sites. I decide I want to be buried here too, if she's looking after this place, but I don't say this to her, not just yet. She says to my parents, we will take as long as you need. I want you to feel really good about where you will be. Michelle describes the options for their sites. The Jewish cemetery, they are not, so not an option. The West Meadow, a grassy field sloping down and into a tree line at its base. This is where Mom saw the dog digging up bodies, so also not an option. And the bobolink, a large meadow toward the north. It has 2 pine trees, distinct among the grasses, one near a spring, she tells us. We are drawn to the bobolink meadow we already know, my father says. A mad, reckless song fantasia, an outbreak of pent-up, irrepressible glee. F. Schuyler Matthews, in 1909, said about the bobolink. A bird song like this over their final home sounds perfect to me. This is a field known for its butterflies, Michelle continues. My mother loves butterflies of all sorts. Her home is filled with butterfly wall hangings, butterflies printed on mugs, a butterfly wind chime, a glass swallowtail. I asked her not long ago what it was about butterflies. They are elegant, and the phases they go through to become a butterfly, they're just so graceful, she says with one of those fill your chest and release sighs. And we did a lot of butterfly catching in Missouri. Missouri is nestled into the trees in the hills just shy of the Himalayas. Mom attended Woodstock School, a boarding school, where she collected stories and made memories, just as I did 25 years later in Israel and Palestine. She continues, it's been a long time, love, thing to see. Oh, and it's a similar view life. We had such beautiful butterflies in India. Yes, butterflies in this field. Milkweed with seed pods just about to release their soft gossamer feathers full of seed. Yellow black-eyed Susans, asters, goldenrod, not quite in bloom, blue cone flowers, and what I think is ironweed covers the meadow. There is a winding path we walk on, down to the large pine. On either side of the path, just under grasses and flowers, are slightly rounded flower and grass-covered mounds. These are burial sites. An occasional stone set into the earth marks 1 or 2 we pass. Just to the side of the 30-foot tall pine on the other side of the mowed path is a beautiful rock-lined flower garden. Michelle tells us who it belongs to. This is Josie. I don't know if you know who she is, but she died in hate crime. She was trans, she pauses. Every year, her friends and her mother come out here and have a party for her. There's glitter on the ground, and they plant everything they bring. Green Springs has a strict policy about what can be planted, and glitter and roses aren't on the list. So her mother comes out the next day, digs up all the plants, and replants them in her own house. It's the same every year. She just knows. My parents have decided they want 2 adjacent sites next to one of the pines. Pine because of a tree that greeted my mother as she arrived alone at Woodstock. Pine because Israel and Palestine's hills and forests are covered by blankets of pine needles. Pine binds their stories together. My sister and I scout out the smaller one, the pine near the spring. Mom has trouble walking, but holding on to my father with one hand and her cane with the other makes her way over to the field to see it for herself. They both know, just as my sister and I do, that this is the spot. Michelle measures out 2 adjacent sites in the shadow of the pine, just off the curved path around the tree. She asks them where they want their heads, and they both want to lay facing the pine tree, the spring, and the northern slope of the meadow just beyond. Mom asks if we can go ahead and plant on the sites. Michelle, without missing a beat, says, "Love them up. They are your spots." "Love them up," a breeze whispers to me. "Love them up."
I forgot to mention that Dan Smalls was in this lineup tonight, but he couldn't come tonight. He's Dan Smalls Presents. He does the shows at the State Theater, and they've got the Dead cover band are coming tomorrow, and I think he just got overwhelmed. But check out DSP Presents, because there's a lot of stuff coming up at the State. Next up is Christa Núñez, the founder and director of CAN Cooperative Media, The Learning Farm, and its nonprofit sister organization, Cuba International, in order to create sustainable food, land, and nature systems for systemically urbanized and displaced youth and families. This work includes the uplifting of stories that center people of color in dignity-affirming ways.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This is beautiful. This is an amazing experience to hear all these beautiful poems and these words. Thank you. I always say that I'm not a poet, but I write poems, and my friends say, "Yes, you are." So this is something I wrote called Another Life, and I wrote it in response to some work I've been doing with farmers who are coming from urban areas and from reservations. It's really about how I'm really moved by people who are creating new lives out of an emptiness and a yearning for nature and for agriculture. Hands in soil, fingers yet unaccustomed to the old ways of doing things, the ovenal ways, the women's ways. But the memories are in the blood, and they stay in the blood. It's like a taking off of shoes, the click-clack of heels, of cubicle life striving toward unfulfilled office dreams, the click-clack now reserved for last night's bachata, bare arches settling into the quiet, welcoming dirt, oaks and willows and almonds and hemlocks and pines, and black locusts zing in the wind, and apple, hickory, and hazelnut flavor the dishes that will hit when I get done with them. Lift graceful branches like God's skyscrapers, a chipmunk's high rise, a tenement for the Beatles, no shoes necessary for this service. The air is cool, lowly, earthy smell, new life brimming, the chatter of squirrels and the chirp and twitter of winged fellowship in the trees. Faraway lands, long lost to us, but connected, still, across lands and seas. Did I hear you say, come back? Did you hear me saying we are the same as we ever were, as we have always been, and I and you and we have always belonged. Those farmers of long ago with the same brown, tapered fingers, delicate and strong lines, different and the same. Both, the palm prints pressing in, united across the centuries. Now new kicks are getting muddy with no one to make fuss because all the kicks are muddy. I had lived on the corner of Flatbush and Ocean. I had packed my things, those small apartment things, those easy things, along with pain and joy and flew, so I could have a chance to touch this great green creation. I hear now Gayacono songs of waterfalls and gorges whispering strong, the mountains and plains that rise up and roll and then run underground for the waves and lift the hulking oceans with waves roaring and remembering more ancestors and those who crossed the waters and back onto the homeland of the others in our blood. Our Haudenosaunee siblings linking our black and brown fingers in the rich gold of kinship. Those Igbo and Ewe, those Anishinaabe, those Hausa, those Dahomey, those Onondaga and Seneca, those Vikings and Protestants, those Angles and Jews, those Scotch-Irish, those Xhosa, those... Together, I ease off those click-clacking heels that pinch my toes and land with bare feet. I scrunch my toes into the moss, covering the forest floor of the earthen plain, a tender share of an immense bounty, and watch my shiitakes grow. That forest floor littered with pine needles, sticky with sap, sticky like a beloved child. I waved so long to that polluted city. Goodbye to August. Goodbye to exhaust fumes and exhausted humanity. Fare thee well to waters clogged with decommissioned ferries, ferrying souls across boundaries that disappear like waves and are forgotten like deferred dreams. I reached my hands deep into the soil to plant my berry bush, and I grazed fingertips with a sister in Lebanon, planting her olive trees by the deep and silent waters. We reached farther, digging a well of earth to bury our plants' roots in, and touched the palm of our sister, laying emoluments of peat and charcoal in Ecuador, planting new fruits in the verdant and well-drained soils of the mountains. We grazed the earth where we kneeled in homeland and felt the throbbing pulse of our sister, planting her 7th row of brown nuts in the rich clay, wet with Nigerian rains. We each skimmed our fingers through the riot of root tendrils, a network of systems holding our earth together, and I tickled the back of my sister's hand, she who layered a mix of rooting material upon her potato-filled hills of Ireland. And we all said to one another, take off your shoes and stay a while.
Next is Raul Palma, the author of A Haunting in Hialeah Gardens, forthcoming from Dutton, and In This World of Ultraviolet Light, Indiana University Press. He is an associate dean in the School of Humanities and Sciences at Ithaca College, and a member of the fiction faculty in the Department of Writing. He earned his PhD at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Raul Palma, writer.com.
Hey there. There you go. Good to see you. This is really lovely. Just getting a chance to kind of peek into everybody's work and with these short excerpts. I came here prepared today to read something, and then I changed my mind when I got here, and then I have now changed my mind back. I'm going to see if I can channel into some of the energy. This is an excerpt of short fiction from a story of mine called Obsolescence, and I'll just jump right into it. When I was a child, I didn't have an appetite. My grandmother had to be clever in order to feed me, so she'd take me on these lizard hunting expeditions in her backyard to distract me. Every time I'd catch a lizard, she'd sneak a spoonful of rice into my mouth. Then she'd take the lizard from my hands, snap its neck, and toss it over the hedges. Do we have to kill them? I'd say, my mouth full of rice. What, do you feel bad for a lizard? Well, yeah. Don't be like your grandfather. We have one. Let's find another one. Eventually, we weren't so much concerned with brown and green and all. They were clumsy, lizards quick to defecate, plus they'd lose their tails when we'd catch them. It was the Cuban Knights that we searched for, the noble, vicious, and venomous lizards. We'd shake them off the trees, then my grandmother would let me beat them with a broom until I'd broken their legs or paralyzed them. And when they could hardly move, she'd snap their necks and toss them over the hedges also. And then she'd force a spoonful of rice into my mouth and say, you'll need your strength for the next battle we have. After I'd grown accustomed to eating rice, she tried to get me hooked on meat. So she'd mince flank steak and hide the bits under a plate of rice and diced mango. She'd feed me as we hunted for nights, but I'd sift the meat and mango out with my tongue, and I'd form these giant, flavorless balls of meat and hide them between my teeth and cheeks. She'd reach into my mouth and fling them over the hedges. Here you are, throwing away perfectly good food, she'd say. Meanwhile, Fidel Castro's drinking horse milk. He's getting closer to the secret of my powers, you know. What powers? And she'd interrupt me by shoving another spoonful into my mouth. That one month in the summer when the storms knock all the mangoes to the ground and the sun turns the pulp to this yellow jelly so that the yard is buzzing with horseflies, my grandmother and I would clean the yard, shoveling mangoes into a wheelbarrow. We'd push the wheelbarrow over the hedges and spend the afternoon flinging them over. Occasionally, she'd cup a handful of jelly and try to shove it in my mouth. I'd have to bite her fingers to make her stop. Concerned I might spill over due to heat stroke, she'd pour cups of ice water over my head. In retaliation, I'd hose her down. By the end of the day, we'd be soaked and covered in mango pulp, and she'd curse at my grandfather for all his planting. Your trees are going to be the death of me, she'd say. When I was 11, my grandfather began raising birds for a living. He spoke bird. All it took was a few whistles and calls, and he'd have any bird eating mango out of his hand. He started out with lovebirds, but upgraded to red lories. One Easter, he seduced a peacock into the yard and trapped it in his tool shed. Convinced that trapping a peacock was bad luck, my grandmother snuck into the tool shed with me. She handed me a broom, shoved me. Why don't we let it go, I said. Because if we let it go, your grandfather will whistle and hold out some mango and catch it again. He always catches them again. We can blindfold him and take it far away and release it in a nice place that would never want to leave. It will return, she said. All birds end up here. She poked at the broom and asked, are you going to do it? Before I could answer, she grabbed the peacock by its neck. The lories went nuts, cawing and beating their wings against the cages. I had to cover my ears to bear their high-pitched shrieks. They sounded like sirens. Their shrieks were ringing and digging into my skull, so I thought I might cry their cries. I was going to step out of the shed, but she slammed the door shut, looked at me. The curls of her hair were plastered against her face with sweat. She lifted that peacock over her head, then she twisted its neck as if it were dough. She was spinning the bird over her head, slamming it into the spades and shovels and pickaxes affixed to the ceiling. feathers. When she dropped the bird on the ground, it went gray and she laughed. It was an embarrassed laugh. She got me carried away and made a mess, and she knew it. Stuck to the blood-splotched shed walls were the peacock's feathers, which made it seem like we were being watched by 1,000 blue eyes. We spent the afternoon cleaning the shed, careful to remove all the feathers. She threw the peacock over the hedge. The following day, when my grandfather asked what had happened to the peacock, my grandmother shrugged and said it must have escaped. Helga, he said, leave my birds alone. Be quiet, old man. So the red lorries were known to attract pests, so my grandfather purchased a cat named Kitty. There was an open lanai, and sometimes Kitty would leave snakes or birds as offerings on the welcome mat by the screen door in exchange for a can of tuna. Occasionally, I'd poke Kitty's offerings with a stick, which my grandmother could not tolerate. She'd curse, coño, carajo, and fling the dead animals over the hedges. Then she'd beat Kitty with a broom, and my grandparents would argue about the proper way to treat animals. When Kitty vanished, it seemed natural then that everything should end up flung over the hedges at one point or another. Sometimes at dusk, I'd climb over the hedges too, careful not to hurt myself. And I'd play in the bird. I'd pretend I was an archaeologist looking for dinosaurs. And I'd dig up the bones of all the lizards and snakes we'd thrown over the hedges for all those years. There were many. Kitty was there, and so was the peacock. Sometimes I'd poke at Kitty's bones, but I'd leave the bird bones alone. Something about the way birds decompose, whirled about their feathers, reminded me of angels. It was lonely on the other side of the hedges. How I wish there was someone to help me unearth all those bones. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. Next, and our last today, is Aishvarya Arora, who was nice enough to do a wonderful workshop for us last Thursday, a writing workshop. Thank you. Aishvarya is a poet, arts worker, and double tourist from Queens. They've received support from the Fulbright program and the Asian American Writers Workshop, where they were a Poetry Coalition Fellow. Currently, they're an MFA candidate in poetry at Cornell University, where they write about grief, desire, and birds. You can read their work in the online magazine Harana Poetry and in the zine To Us and Ours, an Asian American feminist collection.
How's everyone doing? Thanks so much for coming out on a Sunday for so many beautiful memoirs and essays and now some poems. Most of what I'll be reading about today is friendship. It's something that's very mysterious, important to me, and informative to my life. And I hope as you hear these poems, you think of your own beloveds. Where does it come from? How the first sip of orange juice isn't the sight of the orange grove. Row after row of orange and green leaves squeezed down to juice that smooches the bottom of my blue-ridged glass. What luxury! Imagine if every good sight could be poured. Davis's blunted canyons, or the discovery of the swinging bench at the lip of the mucky lake, where the white herons in pairs punctuated the reedy water. What good to see it with you, you beside me. I once bought a whole carton of orange juice in my car for us to sip on our estuary jaunt. Seriously, we called it that. Passed juice between us, discussed doors, our bodies swinging hinges. I promise I prefer my nourishment with seams. I prefer our friendship with stitching, evidence of where the glinting needle leaped and dove. Stranded on the shoulder of the I-60 with Imogen. Persistent rain dials our car's hood, fingering the metal till it rings and rings and rings and reaches us. The storm wants to spend time too. Headlight beams hang on our every word, make mist material. The storm, a sum of drops in atmosphere, wants to stay. Custom calls for marriage this music of her fleeting thoughts, branching symphony of half-baked observations. My body wears the song of her making, her song rhythms my hands smacking my thighs as I laugh at her jokes. Each joke's sparking lifespan, spangling light across days and days of conversation. Imogen, next to you, my desire to gossip becomes a taste. I lick my lips for over and over. Burned between us, gossip yields something good. It pools wax warm from the wick of our words. Life, the flame you run your finger through to impress me. You, a kind receiver of my unvarnished facts. My dear, unvarnished connoisseur. Little poem about nothing. The sun is bold. It strikes the snow but can't melt it. Gleeful to survive, snow shines on our faces. SPF in winter, very important, remarked Sophie. Our jaunt to the slope bench, sculpted by wind, pushes us coated in puffers till we sit with Joelle between us. Splash considerations on the iced landscape like, is this bench best for whispering or making out? Our backs touch the plaque, etched with the family name. How snow on distant mountains uses its whiteness to etch slopes, to show that yes, I would stand. The sun sequins cars down concrete, and all that light we can see, and the kind that bolts between us in every exchange, me talking about my sister and her new boyfriend. The crew reassuring, first love will thaw her. Early snowdrop bud facing up to sun, gulping, and I want to tell you about it, brother, but you're gone. So I call our mother instead, catch her at the nail salon. On hold, I imagine her oblong nail beds, pink petals handing over a 20, and I stay on the phone, overhearing my life. I'll read 2 more poems, and these were written in a workshop with the poet Gabrielle Calabresi. If you don't know their work, I really recommend looking them up. They're a trans poet. They write about embodiment and desire and nature. Their poems are also just silly. I really enjoy them. The moon rose, how realization does. Imperceptible first, then complete when the dark fell. The dark fell for the moon. It was a crush. Darkness fell for the moon who came and went freely. The moon who took clouds as lovers hid behind their affection. Non-monogamous moon and lonely dark. Lesson on loving and being loved. This will be my last poem, and thanks to you all for being here today. Mask for mask, oh God. Butch lover's voice is creek water coursing down an incline in my ear. Butch lover's touch on my back tangles me in green leaves. My boughs shake, my boughs shudder with birds singing, though it is dark outside. Butch lover rubs my hands across their fade's fresh prickle. My butch lips kiss and lick butch lover's stubble. Stone and not stone, butch lovers flower like the yellow head of a mustard plant, flame tops to green stalks opening. As early fog stripes the valley, our sounds strike the bed, air skin touch strikes our bodies. Oh, be or be with. The sun, hungry to name, crosses over, polishes valley separate from sky. Won't name this. What is named goes. Thank you.